Welcome to this episode of Smith's Got Talent. In this episode, we are going to host our guest, Professor Jon Crocker, student Bryan Baires, and student Logan Daeninckx, who are a part of the Space at Smith program. Welcome, and thanks for joining us today. Professor Crocker, can you tell us a little bit about the Space Commerce program here at the Smith School of Business?
Sure. So the Space Commerce program here at Smith is pretty much the first of its kind amongst undergraduate public universities in the United States. There are other schools that have graduate programs like maybe Harvard or MIT, but we are the first public university to have an undergraduate program.
That is amazing. I wonder now, when I look at Bryan and Logan, maybe you could each tell us a little bit about yourselves and what caught your interest about this brand new program here at Smith?
My name is Bryan Baires. I'm an information systems and supply chain management major at the University of Maryland, and I'm a junior. And I'm interested in the program mainly because, ever since I was young, I loved and had a passion for the aerospace and defense industry. For example, originally my major was actually aerospace engineering as a freshman. But, I realized that I didn't really like the engineering part. I was mainly, into the industry. So I switched to the business and supply chain side of things, and that's what brought me here. And when they announced the program, I realized it was an opportunity I can't pass up.
That is awesome. And that's what college is for, right? To figure out what you want to do and where you think you're going to go with your career. That's awesome. Logan, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Logan Daeninckx. I'm currently a senior here at UMD. I'm also majoring in supply chain management. As far as getting into Space at Smith and getting interested in that, I loved sci-fi movies, growing up, and I always thought they were interesting. But you think about those jobs and, coming into business school, I didn't think that I fit in with, the space industry. Going to the Space at Smith event, I learned so much more about, how I can be involved, classes I can take, and, projects I can get involved with. So it was great.
That is amazing because that is where you and I met at the event. Would you tell our audience a little bit about the symposium that you had?
Oh, sure. So last fall we had the Space at Smith symposium where we brought in several panels of experts to come and talk about the space industry. It's just literally launching, getting off the ground right now. Experts estimate that the space commerce industry is worth about $600 billion right now. But over the next 10 years, it's expected to triple, so $1.8 to $2 billion. And here at Smith, we think that's probably conservative. It's probably going to be much bigger than that. And as that industry grows, there's going to be opportunities for everybody. Aerospace engineers, but also business professionals.
I think that's probably what most of our audience is thinking. Why space in a business school, right? Like, how does that really fit together?
Well, and that is what makes it unique. So Maryland has had aerospace engineering at the Clark School of Engineering for a long time, and they are fantastic. But what's interesting is that as these new space businesses are getting on their feet and growing, they may have started with a few engineers or some hot ideas, but as they become real businesses, what they're finding out is that they need people with business field expertise, like supply chain management, like finance, like accounting, like marketing, even lawyers. They need all of those different specializations as they become real businesses. And so that's where we think we can contribute to get this industry where it needs to be.
So says Professor Jon, the lawyer. Even lawyers. I love that. Okay, wonderful. So I think this semester you started some classes. And kind of where have you kicked that off? And then we'll have the students talk a little bit about their experience in the class so far because it's all so new.
So as we launch the program, we have two courses that are ongoing this semester. The first is Industry Analysis of Space Commerce, which is an undergraduate course where both of these guys are currently enrolled. And that's our first flagship survey course across the industry. Then in the second part of the semester is Strategy Beyond Markets from a space commerce perspective. And that will look at how companies shape the landscape from an administrative, legal, and activities such as lobbying, things like that, in order to shape the business environment that they operate in.
Great to hear it's at both the graduate and undergraduate level here at Smith. That's amazing too.
It is, and we're rolling forward. In the fall, we'll have another pair of courses, and we'll just keep building semester after semester.
That's awesome. So you guys are right at the beginning, right? The beginning of the beginning. Maybe you could just share a little bit with us so far, kind of what have you learned in your class? I know it's pretty early on in the semester, but we'd love to hear what you've gotten out of it so far.
For me, what I've enjoyed the most is seeing how many guest speakers Professor Crocker has brought on. Seeing that many, professionals in the industry that I want to work in gives me like that sort of motivation to keep going and to work harder. And, it gives me that reinforcement that, I will make it and I'll be able to work in this industry that I have so much passion for.
Is there anyone that kind of sticks out for you?
The person who stuck out to me was the individual from Northrop Grumman, because that's where I'm interning this summer.
I'm glad that resonated with you. The guest speakers is a feature of the course. What we are trying to do is to first a cadence of bringing in a guest speaker early in the week to represent a particular company. And then academically, we study that company at the same time using business cases or examples from historical analysis so that the students are able to get the academic side and study that aspect, but then also get in context the rest of the story as told and represented by the company. That allows us to bring the industry into the classroom, perfect what we're doing, and at the same time ensure that our students are learning from industry what industry wants to see in the students that we graduate.
So critical, right? We want to make sure we graduate students that are ready for the market.
Absolutely. Well, that's really the test of success. It's one thing to be able to deliver a class. It's another thing entirely to be able to deliver students into a career.
I love that. Being the head of career services, you are warming my heart, Professor. Thank you very much. Logan, how about you? What has sort of stood out for you so far this semester?
Yeah, I would say biggest thing for me is once you start talking to industry professionals and you start learning concepts, and it's all through the lens of aerospace, it becomes so much more attainable. Kind of going back earlier to what I was saying about, growing up, you watch movies about space and it's it's crazy. It's like it's unthinkable. It's action packed. It's we got the best of the best and that's what it takes. And that's obviously what I want to be, but it's like, will I get there? It's easy to kind of doubt yourself, but you talk to these people in class and you learn these concepts and you see, oh, I see how this person, started off in a very similar career path to me. And now they're doing this in aerospace and seeing how, even though it seems like there are so many pieces that it takes to, put something, outside of Earth, it's not unapproachable. And I think that's been like the biggest difference for me through the semester.
Logan, you're not alone. A lot of us got our first interest in space from science fiction and movies and things like that. I remember one, it was called Armageddon with Bruce Willis and Liz Tyler and everything else. But that movie was all about deflecting an asteroid that was on its way for a collision course with the planet Earth. In class just 2 weeks ago, we had a NASA rocket scientist, an actual expert, who has studied and is part of planetary defense, trying to defend the planet against asteroids that might be on a close approach to Earth. And it was just fascinating to see the way he laid all of that out. And I think Professor Barbie in another context, right?
Yeah. So, without going too much into it, part of what I've gotten involved with here at Smith is the Terp Raptor team. And it's a mission to send a CubeSat to visit an asteroid that's going to be passing very close to Earth in 2029. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, but that mission is being headed by Brent Barbie. I've gotten a chance to work with him, talk with him, but really learn about his career. I thought was really fascinating.
What's really interesting about this is a CubeSat mission in order to rendezvous with this asteroid as it makes a close approach to the planet.
This is a cube satellite.
That's right. A small,
You just dropping some.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, because I have like the Jetsons in my mind with all
Okay,
this stuff.
all right.
So yeah.
So a CubeSat is a very small satellite. Think of a loaf of bread, right? That's basically the size of a CubeSat. And this one will be headed towards Apophis, which is the asteroid making the close approach. But what's great about it is that this satellite is being built by a team at the Clark School of Engineering that we talked about before. But nevertheless, the mission costs money. And in order to get that into the sky, we need to have the funding. And Lowen's role is to help that team do the business part of that mission and raise the necessary funds in order to make it all happen. And that's the collaboration between the engineering school and the business school to make this happen.
That is space commerce right there.
It is indeed.
Wow, that is pretty exciting. When you graduate, what kind of a job or role or sort of what are the things you're thinking about in the space commerce industry now that maybe you weren't considering before?
I don't just see aerospace as an opportunity, but also as an opportunity to, be involved in a project like this, right? And if it does, bring me into fundraising and, outreach for something that's not aerospace, it is still an opportunity thanks to aerospace involvement that I got to experience. So I'm definitely, very excited for what's to come, but I'm keeping an open mind and really trying to see what's out there.
And like what Bryan talked about, this is what college is all about, right? This is where you explore things, you learn, you try something new. And the fact that you're kind of getting an opportunity to do something really new here at Smith sort of opens your mind to a lot of possibilities. I wonder, Bryan, how about you? Is there some careers that you're now sort of thinking about or considering that maybe you hadn't thought about before?
I wanted something in the upstream side of supply chain, so logistics or procurement. So knowing that they're, surprisingly in the job market in aerospace and defense, there's actually a lot of jobs, specifically strategic sourcing, where I got an internship at Northrop Grumman and, just working in contracting and procurement and making sure that the supplies are reaching the buyers in time.
Yeah. Well, I imagine if you're in space, supplies reaching people on time is going to be pretty important.
Very much so, because in space, you have to have essential supplies in terms of just water and air and the very fundamentals of life, because you can't exist without it. Now, you guys are getting the first orientation course in industry analysis, and that gives you that historical background on space commerce. Next fall, we'll offer a course in space logistics, and that'll break down exactly how supply chain contributes towards the industry at least 3 different levels.
If somebody wanted to learn more about space commerce, sort of writ large or as an industry to go into, what would you recommend for them to get background in or learn about or come prepared to class for? Or what do they need to know? Well, do they need to know anything to take your class? I guess is really where I should start.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
So to begin, there are no prerequisites.
Okay.
We open the course to everyone across campus, whether you're a business major here at Smith, or maybe you're an engineer or a computer scientist or a physicist or even an astronomer.
Okay.
Anyone from across campus can take 478K, which is that industry analysis of space commerce that gives that initial overview.
So there could be a variety of careers for folks coming out of the class. If you're a business student, what would you kind of envision as like possible careers for folks just based on the industry we have right here in the DMV?
Well, I think the fundamental thing to just from an orientation point of view to get your arms around the idea, there's an article that came out last year written by McKinsey, the consulting firm, along with the World Economic Forum. And they pointed out that the first order is the building of the infrastructure. These are the companies that you've seen like SpaceX or Blue Origin that are out there, putting hardware into orbit. And that's great. But that is a relatively small part of space commerce, because once that hardware is in space, it's the second order of companies that will make use of that hardware in order to further additional business opportunities. Probably the easiest example, using something that we all recognize, Uber. Uber uses GPS technology, which is position, navigation, and timing satellites, in order to give you that GPS dot on a map. And that map functions anywhere in the world because of other Earth observation satellites. But Uber itself is not a space company. It's a transportation company. And so they use that space technology in order to deliver services on Earth, terrestrial services, that would not be possible without that space backbone.
When you talk to your friends about being in these programs, or you try to explain to your family, like, I'm taking this space class, right? Sort of how do you explain why you chose to do this, or what do you see as the benefits for the future going forward?
When I was in high school was when AI first started to become a thing. People were really researching, putting money into, and it was still very early on. But I think even then, people could tell, hey, this is going to be something big. I feel that same way about aerospace right now, that it is, very early. It is a lot of research, a lot of investment. But that, once we have a lot of that infrastructure set up, like you said, Dr. Crocker, we will see a lot of companies, even beyond, those builders of the infrastructure, starting to profit from it. So in the same way that people are talking about now, almost any company being able to use, AI to improve the efficiency, you're going to see the same thing with, the different utilities that satellites and aerospace can provide for us.
I think that's a great insight, Lowen, because not only is AI a very important tool, but when you connect it to the space commerce opportunities, when you look at an AI data center here on Earth, what are the primary constraints? It takes a lot of land. It takes a lot of permitting and regulatory oversight in order to be able to build that data center, because nobody wants it in their own backyard. And it takes a lot of energy in terms of electrical engineering off the grid, which we don't have very much to spare. And it takes a lot of water in order to deal with the excessive heat that builds up within those data centers. So there are companies, as of 2 months ago, looking to launch data centers into space because energy is completely abundant. Solar power is on all 24 hours a day. You don't need to worry about heat dissipation because you can radiate it directly into space. You don't have to worry about permitting or land use. There's lots of room up there. And so for that reason, we can put data centers into space.
This season, during each episode, we'll have a segment featuring the esteemed AI expert and director of the Center for Artificial Intelligence in Business at the Smith School, Balaji Padmanabhan, that highlights the role of AI on the topics discussed.
So if I asked you what's common between Uber, Google Maps, and Instagram's geotagging feature, you'd probably say satellites, right? That's an easy one. But a couple of years from now, like if I asked you what's common between the cost of the food you eat and the investment returns on your 401k, the answer to that might also be space. Now, I'm not going to tell you how, but that's something for you to figure out based on some of the rest of the things that I want to share with you. Now, you heard about first-order companies and second-order companies. We often talk about first-order effects and second-order effects, right? So in space, these were the companies that are building the infrastructure, the first-order ones, and the second-order companies are the ones who are using the infrastructure. Now, AI is going to be a big user of space infrastructure. And two things jump out in this sense. The first is the imaging and the data that space is going to bring will open up opportunities for AI in areas like precision agriculture, agriculture in general, right? Being able to monitor acres and acres of land or hectares and hectares of land, depending on whatever system you use, and then to automatically, water, fertilize the right places at the right time, right? Things that a single farmer and his or her staff simply cannot manage on their own. Now, satellites and space also bring connectivity right, to the planet at large. And AI down the road will want to serve people everywhere they are, right? So you might have a boat in the middle of the Pacific, right, that is doing certain things, but with good connectivity, now might have full access to AI capabilities delivered to it. And the kinds of uses that connectivity can bring for AI, I think, open up tremendous opportunities for individuals and firms. Now, the last part that sometimes people like to talk about is also the autonomy. With all these space satellites flying around, you are going to have someone in charge of controlling these things, right? Like air traffic control. And AI is great for doing that as well. And you're starting to see that the synergies between space and AI are substantial. Now, but not just users, AI can also be a phenomenal consumer, as you heard in this podcast. Data centers, right, and the expensive footprints they leave on Earth. This is, quite a few companies now are exploring space data centers. And before you rule it out, the reasons for doing this certainly seem to make sense, right? Being, accessing power, being able to compute in a place that can release heat safely and so on starts to make sense. And as this plays out, with the amount of infrastructure money that's going into AI, space might actually benefit. Many years back in Star Trek, Captain Kirk had said, I think his famous words were space, the final frontier. But let me tell you a secret, just don't share it with anybody, and particularly don't tell them I said it. What he meant to say was space, the final frontier model. And the microphone, unfortunately, got cut off at the wrong time.
When we had the symposium here, we had a lot of guest speakers. I'm wondering if there was any particular one that sort of stood out to you in terms of their vision or how that helped inform the vision of the Space at Smith program.
For me, yes, there was. We had many good guest speakers,
Yes.
but there was one that really spoke to me, and that was Rashid Neighbors, and he's a vice president at Amazon HQ2, which is here in the Washington, D.C. area. But within Amazon, his role is with their project Kuiper, which is now renamed LEO for low Earth orbit. Well, Amazon's LEO will offer a competitive service to Starlink. So we will get that redundancy in space of the availability of the internet in remote areas of the planet.
I'm sort of gobstopped, if you will, just listening to what you're describing, mostly because, my version of space was in fact the Jetsons is now FaceTime, right? Like, so things that you grow up with and what it becomes is amazing. So what you all are going to see in your lifetime is going to be truly, I think, astronomical.
Yeah, and then, we're both supply chain majors, so you say everything connected and more data and, more connectivity, and it's like, oh, wow, that actually seems pretty good. That seems great.
It really does. Could you share with us a little bit maybe about how Smith has helped you develop as a student over your time here to where you got to a point where you could be in a program like this?
There are plenty of opportunities in this school, more than I expected, to be honest, because it was something that I have so much passion for. Just being brought in front of me, during a presentation, a random day on a school day, I think is very unique and important, and it helps you decide what you want to do in the future, like you said earlier. So, overall, the school has been in many ways supportive, and they give a lot of motivation, more than you expect coming in.
That's awesome. Especially, I'm sure that's got to be comforting to you, Professor.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Logan?
It took me a long time, but I said, okay, I'm gonna try business. But I was not a supply chain major. I was OMBA, and it was interesting. I liked it, but I was like, what's something that's like that really hooks me? And I really got to thank Professor Coronado. He's fantastic. I took his supply chain class, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. I know I want to do this. And after that, it was, okay, now I'm in supply chain. What's next for me? And, I ended up hearing about, Space at Smith, and I went there and I said, oh, this is the next step. This is, taking that supply chain and then, applying it somewhere that it's needed, and then, being able to connect with the right people and, all that good stuff. So I would say, the biggest, thing that UMD has really given me is just, the right people with so much experience and insight and, passion for what they do, no matter what it is like, it's infectious, and then I'm finding that I have it for, whatever the subject may be.
You point to the depth of the bench, and that's great, but there's another aspect to it that may not be immediately clear. And that is when I'm searching for guest speakers to come to class. You mentioned Northrop Grumman, right? That was Marcus Henderson, MBA student, Robert H. Smith. We have HR director from SpaceX coming in a month, MBA student, Robert H. Smith, class of 15. It is the network of the Smith graduates that we're tapping into, and we find them throughout the space industry, and they're coming back home, back to Smith, in order to enrich our program and help point the way for today's graduates.
That is amazing. That makes me feel good, too, about our alumni and their success coming out of Smith, but also their willingness to come and give back.
That's right.
Right. That's always amazing. You talked about how you kind of grabbed onto this excitement from Professor. Tell us how you grabbed onto Terp Raptor, and I think it's Apophis asteroid. Like, how did that grab you, or how did you wind up getting involved in that?
The thing that really brought me in, mentioning this movie again, Armageddon, it's like the last part, or it's like almost the last part of this event, and you come up and you introduce, hey, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this movie, but they go out and they blow up the asteroid, and I was like, well, yeah, that's pretty cool. It's like, I know that one, and it kind of got my imagination going. And of course, what is the actual event that or competition that he's introducing? It's that, hey, we have this fantastic CubeSat mission that we want to go on, but we need the money, right? And it's like almost like, well, I can see the movie in my mind. You know what I mean? Like, how do I play my role in that? I wanted to be involved, and I was like, this is super interesting. It's a great opportunity. It's a huge undertaking. When you said originally 10 million, I'm like, I can't even imagine that much money, right? So how am I going to, raise that for a mission? But I said, well, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? So I ended up, signing up. It was me and one other person, and then we both agreed we'll each do our own, and we'll see what happens. I worked on my proposal. I came up with what I thought, was a great idea, something a little out of the box. I wanted to take a risk. So ended up doing that and giving my presentation. And well, I mean, now I'm part of the mission. So that's the great part. The other great part is that other, person that we were on a team, and then we said, okay, we're each going to do our own, is Yash. And he is also part of the mission now. So we, both of our proposals were accepted. We had a lot of overlap. They saw an opportunity to have like two people that are really aligned in this kind of vision for, what could be, but isn't yet. So, super exciting stuff.
A lot of tenacity there.
There is. And what he didn't say is that Lowen was the winner of that competition. That's why he was selected to be part of the team. And Yash, his teammate, was, in fact, the second place finisher. And so both of them got places on the mission. So that's why they're working together now as Terp Raptor.
And are you allowed to tell us what you proposed?
Yeah.
Like, I would love to hear, so what did you propose?
I was like, you have a great story here. Underdog story of here's this school, and we haven't really launched anything into deep space yet, and we need a lot of money, but it's interesting, right? As soon as you hear about it, it kind of grabs you. And I was like, well, would you pay for a streaming service to see it, essentially, right? If I want to see a movie, I'm going to pay $5.99. I'm going to rent it, right? Or I'm going to pay for Netflix, and I want to see what happens next in my favorite series. So I said, well, can you take that same sentiment that wanting to not only see what's next but also support what's happening, and turn that into funding for the project. So our plan in the long term is to be able to have a sort of media campaign, different photos, different videos, different interviews, different Q&As, events, all sorts of just kind of interesting things, whether you're on the more technical side or you're just a supporter of UMD or you just think this is a cool thing to do, right? And then offer that as like a monthly subscription.
So, Bryan, can you tell us a little bit about the Space at Smith Club?
Currently, I'm leading the formation and creation of the Space at Smith Club. Right now, we're in the phase of looking for officers. So we're at that stage. You want to become official by fall 2026. So if anybody's interested, reach out to me personally. My email is baires@terpmail.umd.edu. And anybody can join really across campus. It could be computer science, engineering, anybody can be involved really. So if anybody's interested, just reach out to me.
That is awesome. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of emails, so get ready.
Hopefully.
So one of the things that I think you mentioned that was a benefit of the club was how you wound up getting an internship at Northrop Grumman.
I decided to put it on my resume because I really wanted to stand out. I needed an internship. So I put it on my resume and I applied directly at Northrop Grumman. And, I didn't need any connections. I didn't need anybody inside the company. And I interviewed with the panel of 3 people. And it went well, smoothly, and they invited me to come for the summer.
That is amazing.
That is amazing. But I think you're being modest. Although I like the story that just listing Space at Smith on your resume gets you an internship. Yeah, I think you've minimized some of your own accomplishments.
Yeah, let me be realistic. When I was in Montgomery College, I participated in a STEM conference where I got first place. And I also had an internship last summer, but that was with the construction company. So overall, I'd say is that you really just want a lot of experience on your resume and list your accomplishments, and you want to be versatile because the presentation that I presented at Montgomery College was completely different from aerospace. It was something about biotech. I think that it's a very unique opportunity to be able to participate in Space at Smith, something that I'm very passionate about. So yeah, I'd just say be involved and try to stand out in some way.
Do you know what you'll be doing at all? Sort of not deeply because it's Northrop Grumman. We won't go there, but just sort of what the internship is going to be like, or what you might be doing.
I'd say it's more towards procurement, since the role is strategic sourcing or supply chain strategic sourcing. It's mainly contracting and just making sure that supplies are arriving on time and just things of that matter. That's the most I
Classic
could say.
supply chain stuff, right?
Yeah,
don't say anything else.
Yeah,
we're good.
I'm not sure what I can mention, but that's all I can say.
Fair enough. One of the other things I wanted to ask about, Logan, is a little bit about the Terp Raptor team. Maybe you could share a little bit with us about that team and the project and how you guys came together and what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd mentioned Yash earlier. I have a short list of people that I want to mention just because everyone has been so incredibly helpful for the mission. I think this is like true about anything in aerospace, is that it can't be done by one person. But I definitely want to give a shout out to Elena Wu, Joshua Verma, Maxwell Weinstock, and Yash Sojitra. All of them have been incredibly helpful and creative. It's been a team effort, and I'm excited for what's to come. Right now, as the business side of an engineering team, we're handling like a lot of different things, which is why I really like the versatility that everyone's been able to bring, to help get the mission. Get the mission off the ground.
If folks want to learn more about that or give to the cause, what should they do?
Yeah, best thing to do is to visit our website, which we'll have on screen, and you'll be able to actually donate directly to the project from there.
That's wonderful.
As well as receive updates. We want to have our media go there as well.
I love that, right? Let's live stream that thing. I feel like Armageddon, right? Like we're gonna live stream and watch the team go the CubeSat go to Apophis. That is going to be amazing.
That's the plan.
I love it.
Big picnic.
What a great impact you both are going to be having on the world. I'm so excited. Professor, did you have any like closing comments for us today before we wrap it up?
Well, I would just say that if you're listening to this and you're a student at the University of Maryland in College Park and you'd like to get involved in the Space Commerce program, look in your catalog for fall 26. We will have another course. It'll be space logistics on the undergraduate side and space policy and commercial enterprises on the graduate side. And just sign up and get on board with us.
I love it. We are right at the very beginning of this thing. I can't wait to see what this turns out to be like in a decade from now. And fantastic. Well, Professor, gentlemen, thank you for your time today. We really, really appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you, hear about your dreams and your visions for the future, and where we're going to wind up with space at Smith. That sounds pretty exciting. So till next time, we appreciate you joining us for Smith's Got Talent. Thank you. To learn more about how to hire our students that can innovate in your business, please email us at smithocs-ae@umd.edu. Again, that's SMITHOCS-AE@umd.edu.